Susan, and I'm a semi-retired senior advisor at the center, and taking the place of Hala Esfandiari, who looks a hell of a lot better, but King Abdullah is in Washington at this time and asked representatives of 5 or 10 organizations to meet with him. And Hala is there and regrets she could not be here. We're very happy to have May Rahani with us. I think you have a short copy of her bio. She has had an extraordinary career. I guess she has worked in 40 different countries and many countries in Africa. Has visited maybe over 70 countries, I believe, in total, from that very important country of Lebanon, and her family is one of the leaders of our very excellent Lebanese American community. Her career has had several turns, several very exciting periods, and some of it I'm extraordinarily interested in, having spent some time in Lebanon myself. But I think the real focus here should be on what she has done with girls and women's education and how important that is for all over the world. And she's in many cases a pioneer and was a co-chair of the UN group working on girls' education. So I'm going to turn the floor over to her. She will talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. You're welcome, and we look forward to having a dialogue with you for most of our time together. May.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Mike didn't tell you that he knows Lebanon very well and knows the Middle East also very well. Thank you. As Mike said, I will start by sharing with you a talk, and then we'll have a discussion. Welcome, everybody. Cultures Without Borders is a memoir that tackles 4 themes: the period of a golden age in Lebanon, the wide-reaching impact of girls' education, women's empowerment, and the common ground that underlies different cultures. It is set as the journey of a young girl who grew up in Lebanon from the 50s through 1975, when Lebanon was, in my view, the only diverse democracy in the Middle East. The media then could and did criticize democracy and criticize people of power, including the president and other national and international leaders, and no one went to jail for it. It was also a time when Christians, Muslims, and members of other faiths lived together in peace. My book tells the story of important shared values and goals of different cultures, learned during my travels to 71 countries and my extensive work in more than 40 countries. I worked with ministries of education, social affairs, women's affairs, health, and others, and with countless urban and rural communities. This gave me a window to understand cultures and populations in an in-depth way. As a result of such involvement in that large number of countries, I realized that there is a common ground among cultures, which is by far more important than the apparent differences. I learned that the more human beings understood, acknowledged, and valued the common ground, the more they became global citizens. My book deals with different cultures and describes where they meet and overlap and where they diverge. I believe, however, that as a result of acknowledging that borders of cultures are porous, the possibilities of war diminishes and the opportunity of peace and human development increases. I felt that I would have failed my task if I did not address each of these themes. However, for today, I have picked one theme and elaborated on it, and the theme I picked is the transformative power of girls' education, which is increasingly being recognized by major governments and donors as a cornerstone of human development. I would go as far as saying that this single issue is the necessary condition to humanity's enlightenment and advancement. This has been illustrated to me time and again in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Morocco, Mali, Malawi, Guinea, Senegal, Uganda, the Congo, and many more countries. I have seen positive transformation of societies that took a step forward thanks to girls' education. I'd like to talk about the reality of girls' education in the world. First, it is important to recognize that today, presently, there are 132 million boys and girls, though eligible to be in school, are not in school. 132 million, both boys and girls. Now, it is important to underline that an unacceptably high percentage of them are girls. The percentage of girls is higher of those who are outside the school. It is important to recognize that the majority of the countries of Africa and Asia, and in some countries in the Middle East, there is a gap between the number of girls who are in school and the number of boys. There are more boys in school than girls. A question begs to be asked, why? Why is that the case? This is where I think we need to dig deep and try to understand the complexity of the reasons why girls are not sent to school as much as boys and are not kept in school as long as boys. And to address the causes within the context of the cultures who are, after all, the ones who must accept and implement solutions. The problem used to be at the primary level. Many countries, not all, made substantial progress at the primary level. However, the problem is persistent and stubborn at the secondary level. There are many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, where the percentage of girls who go to secondary, I'm not saying complete, I'm saying go to secondary, attend secondary, enter secondary, is less than 35% who are eligible, from those who are eligible to go to school. Just imagine, I want to take a minute, and just imagine you pick at random 100 girls in the street of Washington or New York or California somewhere, of those who are eligible to go to secondary school, and you discover that only 35 or less % of them enter secondary school. What would happen to our country here? I think it would be a total disaster. I think the country would go backward. I think the country would suffer economically, socially, human development-wise. We can't begin to fathom, to imagine what would happen if only 35% or less of our girls enter secondary school. That, I think, that image in our head will make us understand what's happening in Africa, in Asia, and in some Middle Eastern countries. Another piece of statistics. Fewer than 1 in 5 girls in all sub-Saharan Africa complete secondary school, which means only 20% of the girls of sub-Saharan Africa complete secondary school. Again, imagine that that's the case in the US. You can't figure, I mean, you can't imagine it. It's hard to accept that reality. Research has found the following reasons to be among the major factors, not the only ones, for not sending girls to school, and I'm talking here again about Africa, Asia, and some Middle Eastern countries. 1, poor households choose to send boys to school rather than girls because poor families cannot afford to send all their children to school. So they make a choice and they choose the boy. 2, lack of running water and lack of fuel in many rural regions of the developing countries translate into girls spending hours, morning hours, to fetch water and to gather firewood. 3, societal norms that dictate that girls' labor is needed at home and in the field. 4, distance to school poses safety and security issues for girls. This is one of the most important reasons why they don't send them. Distance to schools, especially secondary schools. Many villages have primary schools, but a large number of villages in the rural areas do not have secondary schools. So the girls have to walk like the boys, but they allow the boys because security is of a lesser issue. 5, early marriages are a norm in many cultures, and you would be surprised what a strong norm that is, and you'd be surprised how many parents told me, I want to marry my daughter at 11. She was born to get married. That's her destiny. And that's in many rural areas in the countries where I worked. 6, school infrastructures do not accommodate girls. You might wonder, what am I talking about? I'm talking about latrines. If they don't have latrines, girls will drop out. They cannot go to school. The boy can go do something in the bush, not the girl. She'll drop out, especially after puberty. 7, social norms influencing the dropout of girls from school at puberty. 8, misinterpretation of religion. It's a big, big one, and if I have time, I'll tell you a story about that happened to me when I was working with the Shadow Ministry of Afghanistan, Shadow Education Ministry. 9, patriarchal societies that define gender roles in traditional and inflexible ways. And 10, absence of women role models. However, when girls are sent to school, the impact of their education becomes one of the most transformative. Perhaps this is why Boko Haram and other religious extremists oppose girls' education. They understand that girls' education is a transformative power for society. And they don't want that. They're traditionalists, they're extremists. They want to keep the society the way it is and, if possible, make it even more traditionalist. When a high percentage of girls participate in, or even better, complete secondary school, their life expectations undergo significant change, as does their behavior. For girls in particular, there are at least 10 positive outcomes of a secondary education that we should note, and I said at least. 1, the percentage of girls who are married off at the ages of 11, 12, 13 will decrease, and the age at which they are married will be delayed. The World Bank says in one of its reports, some 65% of women with primary education or less globally are married as children. These girls or young women suffer wife beating more than those with secondary education. A second benefit. An educated young woman who marries often has a say in how many pregnancies she and her husband should have, and has greater understanding of her sexual health. Couples that include educated women have a lesser number of pregnancies and children. In some rural areas in northern Nigeria, in Chad, in Niger, in Somalia, in Afghanistan, the number of pregnancies per uneducated woman is often 8 or 9 or 10. That number decreases when women are educated. 3, educated mothers worldwide with functional and analytic literacy have lower infant and child mortality. To me, that reason alone is why we should educate our girls. That is enough of a reason. I don't need any other reason, any other benefit, but I'll give you the other benefits. A fourth benefit: educated mothers with functional and analytic literacy and with fewer pregnancies also have lower percentages of maternal mortality. The fifth benefit: educated women are empowered to access additional opportunities and are almost always more engaged in the activities of their communities. 6, educated women assume more responsibility in the decision-making process within their households, which has a positive effect on their communities as well. For example, research has noted improved environmental factors. 7, educated women are not limited to traditional labor that is often unpaid labor. They look for and find paying jobs or run their own small businesses. Educated women tend to use their income to lift their families from poverty. 9, women with more education have more decision power over their own earnings. And lastly, 10, by completing secondary education, the vulnerability of girls and young women is reduced, as are abuses and gender-based violence at home and within their societies. And before I summarize, I'd like to give you one story that happened with me about girls' education and misinterpretation of religions, and I'll try to be brief about it. I was asked by USAID to go to Peshawar, a city on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and analyze why there is such a low percentage of girls in schools. And I looked at the statistics that were given to us by the Ministry of Education. This is 1993. And the statistics, the latest were 1991, and that's normal. Usually you need a 2 years gap before you get the educational statistics. So in 1991, I discovered that the girls in primary and secondary education in Afghanistan was 2.7. The lowest I've ever seen in my life, in all my work in any country in the world, 2.7. Again, try to imagine what it means. That's the percentage of girls who go to school. So I asked to meet with, at that time, the Shadow Ministry of Education. It's a long story, I won't go into those details. After many discussions, they accepted to meet with me, even though at the beginning they were hesitant, I'm a woman, and so on and so forth. I met with them, and for 3 days, we discussed why is that number so low? Why do you have these statistics? How come you have these statistics? And they kept giving me reasons that to me were not convincing. They said, for example, I'll give you one example, because the Soviets declared war on us, and the Soviets are throwing bombs, and if the bomb hit the school, the girls would die. And my comment to that was, the girls would die and the boys not? And so if the girls are in school and the boys are in school, wouldn't the boys die too? And if that's true, do you value the girls more than the boys? I mean, this was, to me, absurd, not convincing whatsoever. They kept giving me reasons of that nature, and finally, after 3 days of lengthy meetings, one of them said, I'm going to give you the main reason. And I said, yes, please. And he said, the mullah tells us not to send our girls to school because of our religion. And in a way, I was waiting for that. I really wanted somebody to tell me something about religion, to use religion as an excuse. And I said, thank you for giving me that reason. Would you allow me to write on the blackboard? We were in a conference room, and there was a blackboard. And he said, yes. So I went up, and I said, I'm going to write in classical Arabic, and then I'll translate it into English, and then we'll discuss it. He said, okay. I wrote in Arabic, Al-ilmu wajibun ala kulli muslimin wa ala kulli muslima. And I said, this is from the Hadith, al-Sharif. Al-Hadith means these are the words of Prophet Muhammad. And I said, let me translate this into English. And I translated it, and I said, education is the responsibility of every Muslim man and every Muslim woman. And I said, you know what? The Prophet could have stopped and said every Muslim man. He was deliberate. He was deliberate and said every Muslim woman, because he didn't want anybody to misunderstand him. and not your mullah. And I said, you want to bring the mullah here to have a discussion with me in front of you about the hadith? And that was the only way I was able to convince them. But these misinterpretations of religions are amazing, and they happen everywhere. And more so, I would say, in most of the countries that I've been to, but more so, I would say, in Muslim countries that do not speak Arabic or read Arabic. So the mullah has the right to interpret the way he wants, whatever he wants. In summary, a girl that completes secondary education is empowered in very practical ways, tends to assert herself, and to play a constructive role in the social and economic decisions of her home, her family, and her community. This is what extremists like Boko Haram, as I said earlier, and the Taliban and ISIS seek to end. Empowered women with minds of their own, and women who want to help determine their and their families' futures as equal partners, are not acceptable to such extremists. Educated women are far less likely to accept subjugation and oppression that is imposed on them and their communities. The voices of educated women can and will become a transformative power in very traditional societies where extremists dominate. The book, my book, Cultures Without Borders, finds the common ground and the common solutions to stubborn problems facing our global village. It is an account about bridges that link different populations together. It is, in particular, an account of steps in human development and expansive possibilities. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, May, for that scene setter. And I might just say that May's brother, Ramzi Rouhani, is with us. And Ramzi, good to see you again. Thank you for being here. I'm going to open the floor and resist starting with a question. Well, I may do that later. The floor is open. There will be a microphone that somebody will give to you. If you want to, when you want to raise an issue. No speeches, but comments and questions. Yes.
Hello. Thank you, May. My name is Andrea Bertone. I'm the director of the Gender Department at FHI 360. I had the pleasure and honor of working with May for many years at AED and then FHI 360. Thank you, May, for your inspiring talk about girls' education. It's always wonderful to hear you so encapsulate the reasons why we need to keep girls' education at the highest levels of every political agenda. And you bring up an excellent point about when we get to secondary education for girls, we seem to have not had the same level of political commitment as we've seen from governments and organizations as we've for the primary level. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are about what do we really need to get people, governments, organizations on board with making that same commitment to girls' education at the secondary level, because we know that's where girls really blossom, that's where all of these health and social, economic benefits happen, but that commitment hasn't been made yet.
Excellent question, Andrea, and thank you for asking it. And you're absolutely right. And that's why secondary is not moving, progressing as primary did, secondary education for girls, I mean. And your question is about strategy and policies. And I think to be able to convince governments the dialogue should continue. We should never be satisfied with the fact that we made progress. That's number one, that we made progress at primary. The big problem is that we sit on our chairs and say, yes, we made progress. That is not enough. That is not sufficient. We cannot accept that as serious progress and progress that will really help the girls and their communities. That's number one. An acknowledgement and awareness that that is not enough. Number two is to highlight for many governments in Africa and Asia and part of the Middle East the economic benefit of girls' education, because these are poor countries, or some of them not so poor, badly governed. Sometimes it's a question of governance, and sometimes it's a question of poverty, and sometimes it's both. So both play a role. But the economic argument is extremely powerful, very, very powerful. And if we know how to articulate that economic argument and prove to the governments that with every year of education, of girls' education at the secondary level, the GDP goes up. And we have those studies. The World Bank did those studies. Many organizations like FHI and AED before did studies of that nature. The UN is doing those studies. We need to dig those results, those findings, and keep highlighting them with governments. And the third point that I'd like to make is we cannot work only with the Minister of Education, he or she. We have to work with the Minister of Finance, Minister of Planning. We need to convince other ministers, and ideally whoever are the political leaders who make a difference in that country. Sometimes it's a prime minister, sometimes it's the president himself. I remember when Congress Pomeroy went with me to Mali, and we met the president of Mali. This was a period where Mali was doing extremely well. And he made the commitment to girls' education. And we presented to him, Congress Pomeroy, Earl Pomeroy, and myself. And we were a team there. We had several people with us. And he made the commitment to girls' education, and he put more money into the Ministry of Education, which meant allowing them to build more secondary schools for girls. Yeah.
I just wanted you to clarify, because that's a startling figure. You're saying for much of the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, 35% of the women that go to primary school do not go to secondary school.
I'm saying 35% of those who are eligible, meaning we look at their age, school age. Let's say we look at 11 to 18. Only 35% go to school, and that's Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, go to school, and only 20% complete secondary.
Yeah, no.
Complete, only.
I think those two statistics are extraordinarily important.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Next question. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks so much for your insightful comments. My name's Amy Johnson. Until very recently, I worked for Peace Corps. I'm now an independent consultant focusing on international and community development. And I wanted to go back to a comment that you made very early on in your remarks about urban and
Yes.
I think so very often we
Yes.
focus on rural.
Yeah.
Yet urban, there's also very urban concerns. Sometimes different weight of the reasons why girls are not in school or different rationales. But I wanted to see if in your work, if anything that would particularly rural girls that are sent to urban areas to work perhaps for family members or somehow contribute to the finances of the family, is that would highlight different strategies for urban schooling versus rural.
Absolutely correct. Yes, and there are different strategies, and we need to work on different strategies. I gave a global presentation about girls' education. Each one of those, either obstacles to girls' education or benefits, we can give a presentation about each one of those 10. I gave a set of 20 between the obstacles. And let's talk a little bit about urban and rural. And also I want to say one thing before I talk about different strategies, and it differs by country. It really differs. There isn't a cookie cutter at all. There isn't one approach that fits everybody. There isn't one size that fits all. Totally wrong. It really has to be tailor-made to each country, tailor-designed to each country. And it can't be designed by us, outsiders. It has to be done with them. And they have to take the lead. We are facilitators. So after saying that, then I can talk about strategies. For the rural strategies, I'll give one or two, and then I'll give one or two for urban. Rural strategies, in particular, they need more secondary schools, so we can cut down the distance, and that's a big element. And we need schools that are girl-friendly, which means they have to have latrines. I mean, a bit what I mentioned, and I can detail that, because it doesn't exist. And those girls who need to walk, and I'll give one example from Morocco, in the Atlas, in the mountains, they had to walk an hour, 15 minutes going, and an hour, 15 minutes coming back. And if they have to go to secondary school, and if the sun sets and it's a bit dark, they won't let them. They're worried about them, and I can understand. So we need to build more schools. We need to build them that in a way with an infrastructure that's girl-friendly and so on. Another big one in the rural areas, big, huge, is women teachers. We do not have enough women teachers in many rural areas where the culture dictates that I will not send my girl to secondary school if a man is teaching her. So that's another big strategy. I wrote a book called Learning for the 21st Century, Women and Girls Education, the subtitle, Women and Girls Education in the Middle East and North Africa. UNICEF published it. And UNICEF, I'm happy to say, I wrote it in English. UNICEF translated it into Arabic, French, and Farsi. And in that book, I talk about strategies of urban and rural in particular. Your question, exactly. So urban strategies, and Andrea and Ahlam, who are sitting there, would agree with me. In Tanzania, one of the biggest problems, and it's an urban issue, is how does the girl from a shanty town in an urban area, let's say Dar es Salaam, can go to a secondary school? They use bicycles, they use maybe public transportation. They are harassed. They're harassed in public transportation. We need to make public transportation safer. We need maybe to find bicycles for them. We need to look at gender-based violence issues that are very linked to secondary education, more so maybe in urban areas, and solve these problems because they're so linked to girls' education at the secondary level. Again, women teachers is an issue, not in all the countries, in some issues. Yemen, women teachers in urban areas, in cities, is a big issue for secondary education.
Yes.
Thank you. My name's Carolyn Long. I'm an independent international development consultant, and May and I worked together in the late 70s when she first came to the U.S. at TransCentury Corporation, where she developed our Secretariat for Women in Development, as it was called then. May, you mentioned in your talk that in countries where people are Muslim but are illiterate, the interpretation of the Quran is a problem because they think the Quran says that women, children, girls should not be educated. I hadn't realized that because I thought that in places like Pakistan and elsewhere where the madrasas are so prevalent that they would be learning Arabic and therefore they wouldn't know that. So they would know that. So that's one thing that really struck me.
Yeah.
And that leads me to a question about child marriage. When girls are married off at 11 or 12, are the cultures invoking the Quran in that decision, or is that a cultural decision primarily?
Both questions are important. Let me take the first one first. Many countries in Africa, in Asia, the population does not speak Arabic, that are Muslim countries. Senegal is one, Guinea is one, Mali is one, Niger. I can keep going. They do not speak Arabic. The population doesn't know a word. They might know shukran or something. I mean, nothing, really nothing. They don't know Arabic. And more so the illiterate. The literate don't know Arabic. So the illiterate don't know a thing about Arabic, nothing. Now, the madrasas in Pakistan in particular, and the madrasas in Africa and Senegal, where I attended one of the madrasas, went in and got permission to go in and sit in the back of the classroom. The teacher who's teaching the Quran is teaching it by rote. He himself doesn't know Arabic. Again, an anecdote in Senegal. This happened to me in Senegal, in Dakar. I went to a madrasa, sat in the back of the room, and at the end, I raised my hand after he finished his lesson, and I asked him a question in Arabic. And you know what was his answer? I asked him classical Arabic. Oui, madame. That was his answer. He knows French. He knows his local language, whatever is his local language, and he knows the Quran by rote. He knows that Arabic of the Quran by rote. His answer to me was, oui, madame. And I said, in Arabic, "Can I ask a question?" And he looked at me, it's like, "Why are you doing this to me?" And then I went ahead and asked the question, and he couldn't answer it. And when we left, he said, "I wish you didn't do that. I cannot answer your question." Kind of, I embarrassed him, kind of. They don't know Arabic. They know by heart. It's like if I learn an opera in German. I can maybe learn it by heart, but I don't know German. Maybe. Any one of us can maybe learn by heart a certain opera or something, a certain song, but we don't know the language. That's what's happening. And that's why the mullahs take advantage of that and use the religion as a tool to gain power. So that's the first question. The second one, no, they don't use the Quran when they marry the girls young. They don't. They don't quote the Quran, they don't quote the Hadith, but they tell them that's our tradition, and that's what you're going to do, and you have to obey. And I'm sure many of you heard about the Yemeni girl who was married at 9, and she was so feisty and courageous. She went to court, she ran away, went to court, and asked for a divorce when she was 11. That's a rare case. Not many Yemeni girls or any girls would dare do that. Nigerian girls or Guinean girls would dare do that. They might be beaten up really heavily. They can't do that. But this one was courageous and did that. But no, they don't use religion for that.
Yeah, the lady, yep, behind you.
Hello, May.
Hello.
Yes, and I worked at TransCentury a little bit with May also. She's kind of a
You
legend.
stacked the audience, May.
Sort of a, she's sort of a legend to all of us, as we all
No.
know. So, May, I'm just wondering, I'm in touch with this guy who started a whole bicycle exchange, sending bicycles all over the world. And he was telling me how much it really helped women to get to school. Now, you just said that when women are on bicycles in certain areas that it's quite dangerous. And I just wanted to know about that because I'm going to Tanzania and Morocco, and he wants me to help with these bicycles, and I want to make sure I give them to the right people.
Yeah, I think the idea is excellent, but I also think we need to be careful about educating the community how to use the bicycle, educating the community about gender-based violence, educating the leaders of the community. And when I say leaders, I mean men and women, and I mean religious and non-religious, and I mean elected and non-elected. The traditional leaders are very important in these cases. We cannot just give them the bicycle. So there is around the bicycle a whole community involvement, engagement, education activity that goes with it, then the bicycle is perfect. But without that, it might be a bit risky for the girls. Yeah. No, but harassed. I wouldn't say attacked, I would say harassed. In Tanzania, they use bicycle. I know the Malawi case even better. We used motorcycles, and our program decided to give them motorcycles, given how long, for the teachers, not the girls, the women teachers. We gave them motorcycles, given how long the distances were, and they had 2 shifts to do, morning shift and afternoon shift, and they were dropping this afternoon shift. So we gave them motorcycles, trained them on it, but also did a community engagement activity around all of that to make that transportation method safer. Yeah.
Yeah. Lady here and then there.
Hello, I'm Patricia Viala, also a colleague of May's when we worked in Morocco on a girls' education project. I happened to do some research. I was very fascinated with the idea of education providing women the opportunity to be more active in their community and have a better, more empowerment and more decision-making role in their household and in their community. So I decided to study the situation in Pakistan. I researched, I did a very in-depth historical study of 10 women who had at least completed a secondary education and even went beyond. Some of them did, undergraduate degrees, and some of them even had a master's degree. And the one thing I realized, this study was done in the mid-90s in Pakistan. And what was very encouraging about the study is basically along the lines of what May was saying, is that a lot of these women, even if some of them couldn't actually decide for themselves who they would marry or the type of job that they would have, they definitely allowed that power to their own daughters. So that was wonderful to see that some of them could have that decision-making power themselves or fought for it, but some of them had to still navigate the social, traditional, cultural constraints, but they all were able to afford or give their own children, their own daughters, more liberty. So women who had arranged marriages themselves were definitely going to make sure their daughters were going to have love marriages.
Yes.
They were going to allow their daughters to pursue more career options than they themselves had. So that was exciting to see this sort of generational.
Absolutely. The term generational is very, very appropriate here. Whenever a woman is educated, there are generational benefits, be it education benefits or social benefits. For both boys and girls, both benefit from that, yes.
Gentlemen, yep.
Hi, May.
Hi, David.
My name is David Levine. I'm kind of at the tail end of a career in international development, and my path has crossed May's various times from the 70s on.
Yeah.
And my wife and I are currently good friends of May and Zuhair's. So with that, this is going to be a different kind of question.
Let's go ahead.
Partly an acknowledgement and partly a request for some reflection. You come from an extraordinarily privileged background, from a family with both historical and current influence, power. Your home, as you've described it to me and in the book, was a gathering place for all kinds of things. It's rare in my experience to meet someone who comes from that privileged background and yet winds up devoting her life not just to service, but to service of a particular kind that has a lot to do with getting one's hands dirty and a lot to do with confrontation. And so part of it is an acknowledgement of that. But the question is, I'd be interested in your reflections, and Ramzi may want to stick his own 2 cents in, but your reflections about what were both the positives and the negatives that you had to deal with in coming from that kind of a background to make the kinds of life commitments that you've made?
Very, very powerful question, and very, I have to reflect on that, and I have to think, but at least in a preliminary way, I'll answer this way. But you have to allow me that I'll think more about it, and maybe I'll give you a more in-depth answer at a later stage. But let me start by saying this. When I decided to write that book, I asked myself, really, why am I going to write this book? And the first answer that came to me, I owe it to others. I was born to privilege, and with privilege come responsibility. And my responsibility, I felt, at least, I don't know if I did it well, is to serve and share the lessons learned from serving. So that's really the serious reason behind the book. Now, there is some selfishness in that, because you get a lot of rewards by serving. You get amazing rewards. You go back home to bed and you say, thank you that I was able to do that, even though I must have faced a lot of challenges. And I mean, I know some ministers were not happy with me. I know maybe some donors sometimes challenged my decisions. Even our wonderful donor who's in this building, USAID, my biggest donor. Not often, but sometimes they would challenge a decision, and I had to navigate my way and see what can I do to convince them, or they had to convince me. So yes, a lot of challenges. What were the difficulties as a privileged person? I'll tell you honestly, my first trip to Africa, it was a fork in the road. Either I would commit myself to do the work, or I would pull out. Because I didn't know, don't laugh at me, but I'll be honest. I didn't know how to take a shower with cold water. I just didn't. I was terrified of, I mean, these are the little things, but they become important. This is daily life. I went and lived in Bandundu for 1 month. 1 month. Every morning, they'll give me a bucket of cold water. And that's what I had to use to wash my hair and have a shower. And every day I felt, am I crazy? I'm doing this work. Why don't I go back and live my real life? But I had to make the commitment. So yes, I gave you one example. I can give you 10 examples of difficulties. I was frightened once that something will happen to me. Not once, 3 times. Serious, serious, serious. Fear. I was totally in fear that I would be raped or something. So yes, you do face difficulties, and you ask yourself, am I making the right decision to continue in this line of work? Why don't I, especially when you were born to a family like mine? Thank you.
That's some very interesting observations. Yeah, I'm just going to follow that on, and then the lady in black at the corner. One important thing, and you mentioned it, is role models as a way of inspiring women. And I've been struck over the last 7, 10 years of the number of women entrepreneurs throughout the Middle East region, and what an enormous impact they are having. But very frankly, I feel that they're not stepping up as much as they could to return to their communities, to go to the rural areas as well as the cities, to encourage women. There's another path. There are things you can do. I feel, being a retiree and male, pale, and stale, probably, that frankly, there continues to be, even with men that are under 40, some hard resistance to what girls' education and girls' opportunities is going to mean for the way of life or the way things have been done. And there's still a resistance. So the women who have succeeded enormously, I don't feel are going back, are doing as much as you are in trying to get the good word out or whatever it might be. And I see that resistance on the male side. But maybe that's more an observation than,
But
than a
I'm
question.
afraid you're right. I'm afraid you're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I'm also Lebanese American.
Huh.
So I'm a friend of Ramzi. I came here from New York City to DC and worked in international development, now in the private sector, doing marketing. That's my little bio there for you. 2 questions for you, May. One, I mean, the world is changing today, right? We all look around on the news, gay marriages everywhere, including DC. People are listening. You know, media, social media, wars everywhere. We are in tune with the world. And so whether we're on the East or the West, we're in the Middle East or in the US. So how do the recent changes, whether it's political, how is that changing the situation? I mean, I'm listening to education back in the days, but I feel people are more sort of outspoken these days. Maybe mothers or daughters, people want to voice their opinion. It's not what it used to be back in the days. Human rights are changing, and people are speaking out on social media, for instance. So how do you see, I see hope in the future, is what I'm trying to say. So do you see that? And then my second question is, if the man is the enemy, which we all know, I mean, those issues are issues in the US as well, right? you're back to the entrepreneurships and women being, I mean, we have that problem here as well, right? Education in the US isn't huge either. So if we are to say, okay, man is the problem, did we partner with the man? You know, he does have a wife and he has a mother and he has a daughter. Did we try to have those conversations to bring him on board?
Okay. Two quite different questions. And I might this time start with the second one first, the men. I think men are not the enemy, men are the partners. And I think we, men and women, need to always be inclusive in our approach. Include the men, include the old, include the young, include the women, include the girls, listen to their voices. That's why I talk about community engagement, the community, and I talked about leaders, and I immediately said community leaders that are men and women, and so on and so forth. We have to include them. Gender roles are very, very important, and we need to understand them, and we need to understand that gender roles carry power with them, or less power, and we need to explain all of that to everybody, or not explain, facilitate the explanation so we understand it better. We are not there to teach anybody anything. We learn from them. We're good listeners. If we are good listeners, we find the solutions. And if we are good facilitators, we find together with those communities, men and women, boys and girls, we find the solutions. We're all partners. As long as we accept the fact that we're partners, I think we can find solutions. That does not mean that there is no resistance. The resistance is absolutely there, and more from men than from certain women in general. I'm generalizing a bit. But it doesn't mean that they become the enemies. They become more of a need to make them our partners. The need is greater when they're resisting. The need for us to listen carefully and understand their resistance and why is greater. The need to continue dialoguing and talking with them is greater. The need not to drop them as our partners is greater. The minute we drop them, we lost the battle. We cannot drop the men. We cannot. They're with us. They're there to stay. They're our partners. We are sometimes leaders. They are sometimes leaders. We share everything. We make decisions together. That's the most important piece. We make decisions together. So we need them. So that's the answer about the men. To come back about times are changing, absolutely. And the amazing thing is you will see pockets. And I'm going to take a country that I know very well, Guinea in West Africa. It's a troubled country. It's a country that went through many civil wars, a country that went through dictatorship, a country that, like many others, I'm not picking on Guinea, that has a lot of corruption, like many others. I want to underline that. I'm not at all picking on Guinea. I love the Guineans. And one of our staff, Dr. Ali Badara Doucouré, is one of my favorite people. But having said that, Guinea, you will find pockets in the city or in a rural area where they go to the internet cafe and the youth are working on social media, and you find another pocket that is so traditional and so conservative and nearly extremist. They wouldn't shake my hand because I'm a woman, okay? And I have to be careful what I'm wearing and what I'm saying and to be able to talk to them. And so you have pockets. And look at the Middle East and what's happening today. Who would have said we would have ISIS? Those who study the Middle East very, 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 very well and in depth might have predicted that we would have ISIS. But many were surprised with ISIS because I declare, and I believe I'm right, and I hope statistics will prove me right, they are the minority. They're not the majority. However, they are a powerful minority with a loud voice, with money, with arms, so we need to pay attention. We cannot neglect them. They're a strong voice, and they're a voice of extremism, and they're a pocket of violence, and they're a voice that will never give the woman her right or the girls her right, and they will fight until the end against women's human rights and girls' human rights. So we have both in this changing age.
Let's hope they're a minority. Yes, would you like to?
My name is Nadia Abaris-Assad. I'm with the Renee Mawad Foundation. We do development work in Lebanon. Thank you, May, for such an insightful presentation. I was wondering, and it's very interesting that, access or distances, what about modern technology? The computer, the internet cafes that can transcend the distances. You can have a cyber classroom, internet, that you can reach to faraway places. I realize it means you have to have the computer to start with, or electricity, or things like that.
Yes.
But it could, has that been studied?
Yes,
to
yes,
have-
yes,
transformed
yes.
Africa.
Yes.
So
Cell phones are even easier than, yes, you're right, and it has been studied, and technology in many places is a transformative power, no doubt. But you have many, many rural areas. We, in our language, we keep talking about the last mile, the last mile. How do you reach those last pockets in rural areas that have no electricity, no running water, no energy, nothing, where both parents are illiterate, where the whole community is illiterate? The computer is not going to help them. In addition, we cannot just, you would be surprised how many computers I've seen in many African and some Asian countries and some Middle Eastern countries, Yemen, that are dead computers. Nobody to fix them, there is a problem, it dies. That's it, it dies. Nobody knows how to deal with it. We need to train everybody on technology when we send technology. We cannot just send computers. Computers by themselves are not a solution. It's not a sustainable
The
solution.
cell phone at that point is much easier.
Yes, much easier. The
And
cell
cheaper.
phone is a better solution than the computer itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been marvelous. I should end, I think, with a plug for the book. The question that I had wanted to ask May about, and I'll just throw out the question, and leave it there. But I urge you, this is a very good, interesting story, vignette, the series of wonderful vignettes. At one point early in May's career, I believe, she was an advisor to to the Imam Sadr.
That's right. Oh my
And
God.
that is extraordinary when you think about, unfortunately, where Lebanon is today. And well, I guess we just hope that we can get back to that kind of environment. But I urge you to dip into this book. I'm not finished it, but I did read a chunk of it. And thank you very much for being here today, and all the best.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be at the Wilson Center. So thank you, Mike Van Dusen, and thank you all of you for coming.
Thank you.
I will sign some books outside for those.